How would you feel if you got fired by your dad? And then when you went out to get a job, he wouldn't even qualify you as a reference. Today on the show, we have someone who's going to tell her story. And she was in an industry that was run by men. She had uphill battles all the way through. And yet she managed to become a very successful writer and a producer. Stay tuned and listen to her story. Okay, Dyan, thank you for coming on Fishbowl. I really do appreciate it. I actually, there are a few people out there that have like a Fishbowl podcast. I kind of checked into that thing, but Fishbowl for me is a metaphor of life. In case you wanted to know some little detail, and life to me is like being inside of a fishbowl, and at times life is very choppy. Sometimes it's smooth. Always changing. You got to keep moving to stay in the game, So that's kind of what the fishbowl represents to me. It's a metaphor, at least for my life as I've lived it. And but I wanted to ask you, what are you? The title that you give to yourself as far as what you do. What do you do for your living?
I'm a television writer and producer, as well as a feature film writer and producer.
Okay. And how long have you been doing that?
Not a really long time. I started out working for my father, who was a director and did commercials and wanted to ascend in his company. And I would have been taking his job essentially. And when he was out of town one week, I interviewed to see if I could get a job somewhere else, just to see if I was desirable at another company in Hollywood. And I happened to get a job at a leading post-production facility. Mm-hmm. And my dad was so tough. When he found out I was even looking, he fired me. Oh, wow. On the spot. Yeah, he was a really tough business person. Really nothing has been tougher to me than working for and knowing my own father. So I quickly ascended in the post-production business and sound design. I became the youngest sound director in the history of Hollywood when I was 25. And wow. Yeah, so I quickly, and for the number one company, Sound Deluxe, and then their sister company, I became president of that, Meridian Studios. And then another company of theirs, which we were all running simultaneously. And I then decided it wasn't creative enough for me. And I got the business side down. So I decided to become, later in life, I wanted to produce. And then I found out if you produce television, you need to be a writer as well. And I had always wanted to write, but I didn't think I could make a living at it. So I just started, I partnered with Reed Steiner, who became my husband. And we partnered together selling concepts for shows, television shows. And, we're still partners. And, but I'm also branching out on my own. And so I've set up 9 pilots for TV shows where I come up with a concept, I sell the concept, and then we write them. And for one reason or another, they haven't, which is very common, they haven't been made into television. For, a couple examples are the executive in charge loses his job or leaves the company, the president leaves the company, and the new president doesn't want the old president's material because they can't get the credit for it. There's just always, or the star falls out, or it's just such a precarious game. You get paid, but, it's just a constant grind. So now I'm involved in a project that was my father's feature film that I had mentioned to you when we spoke on the phone. It was remade into Knock Knock with Keanu Reeves, and his movie was called Death Game, and Eli Roth did it, the director and producer and actor. He was in Quentin Tarantino's movie as the Bear Jew. He I don't know if you know, oh my God, what was the movie? Bastards, Inglourious Bastards.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And he was the Bear Jew in that. And so anyway, he's an amazing director and producer, and he and my dad really clicked. And he interviewed my dad for, it was to go on it's a 2-hour interview at the end of the Blu-ray. And my dad passed away 3 weeks after that, unexpectedly. He was only 77, wow. Huge Gold's Gym guy. And I thought you might have known him actually, because he had been going there for so many years, and was the longest running member there. So anyway, when he passed away, I then collaborated with Eli and a couple other producers, and we came up with an agreement to present 10 remakes of the movie in foreign countries. So it'll be the same movie, but one in Spain and one in France, one in Italy, Germany. So I'm excited to do that. Yeah. So I'm a producer in that capacity. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then I'll write the final episode. Yeah.
So I want to go back to your dad for a second here, because you said that, he was a tough boss. And my dad was too. He was very hard on us. I mean, that was just the way. And my dad in those days, that's the way they did stuff. I mean, I had to do chores at a very young age. We had a dairy business, and it was like before you go to school, and then after you come back to school, you're always being held accountable. But I got to tell you something. I don't know if this is how you feel now, looking back. I'm glad that my dad was really tough on us as kids, because it taught us how to work. And it was a life lesson, because just the things that you're talking about, all those moving parts that are in the line of work that you do, it's a lot of parts have to work together for a project to come to its fruition, based on what I'm hearing from you. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, just you should get an Oscar for getting a movie made, let alone it being the greatest movie that was made that year. But I know what you're saying, and I think that's admirable that I didn't have to get up at the crack of dawn to do my job. And I don't know, my feelings would be hurt more, because there was so much creative interaction with my dad, where the dairy business, as hard as that would be, it's so labor intensive, I can imagine. I'm not sure your feelings would get as hurt. As my feelings would get hurt.
But I think the point is, in a way, is that that's something that you had to learn to deal with.
Right. I'm so strong now as a result. Right? I can deal with anybody, any man. I mean, they have to watch out for me. I can handle anything now as a result of having worked for my father. You're right. That's
kind of what I mean. Is I look back now, and I think he's been gone for quite a few years, but in my head, I thank him all the time, because it was just a lesson. I didn't like it in the beginning. I'll tell you what, I hated it, and the stuff that he had us do. But I'll tell you what, at the end of the day, he did me a big favor, so that's kind of what it sounds like. I thought maybe you got from being in a tough situation with your dad like that.
Yeah, and look at your discipline, and how hard you worked out and trained and overcome adversity. And I'm sure that was from your father, both genetically and also just in terms of your environmental training.
Huge life lesson. We sometimes just don't realize when we're actually being taught or learning a life lesson, because it was so young. I couldn't even imagine that. I disliked it too much, because I wanted to play sports.
Oh, right. And your dad has such a strong work ethic, which you inherited. And me too. It was our frame of reference, you and I. I mean, we didn't know any better. I only knew I had to work that hard because that's how my parents were.
Yeah. What got you into that side of it? I think you said it was sound and design. Is that what you said?
Sound design. So, sound design for movies.
Okay.
And my dad and I were clients. They were doing this one company. They were, one of the first. I was very young, and they were one of the first all digital post-production houses, and we were their clients. And So they were really the only other company I knew in the business besides my dad. And because, I would bring my work to them for my dad to do the sound sign on the commercials. And, my dad did car commercials and very high end direct mail videos at the time for car companies. And then he would always get the cars, like he would get an Audi because he did a commercial for them. So he was very entrepreneurial, and I picked up on that. And so when I was, I wanted to see what my value was, which, he taught me, I learned from him to do that. And so I approached the owner of the company where I was doing our sound design for the commercials. And I said, would you be interested in hiring me? Because I had learned the sales, what I was doing for my dad, in addition to directing, when he was directing and being his assistant, and he was producing and his assistant in that capacity, I was getting the business for him. I learned how to be a salesperson at a very young age. And so I would cold call Fortune 500 companies. And, when I was 22 years old, and get my dad meetings with the senior VPs or executive vice presidents of these companies. I don't know how, I look back on it. I mean, I don't know how I had the courage to even do it, but I did. And I think I had nothing to lose, is what I must have been feeling. And I would get my dad these meetings. So, and that's why I wanted to start taking the meetings myself. And he was like, no, I'm doing them. Thanks. Yeah. So then I went to that post-production president or owner of the company. And I said that I was, a sales person, and I would master whatever they were selling. I didn't know a lot about it, but I could do it. And he believed me. And the day my dad fired me, because they called my dad for a job reference. And that's when he fired me, when he heard that I was looking. I hadn't even taken the job. Wow. And so I sold my car when he fired me, and I went to Hawaii, and I hadn't gotten the job yet. I was just like, fuck it, excuse my language, excuse my Italian. I'm in Italy right now. No. And so I just went to Hawaii, and I got a message on my answering machine that I had gotten the job, and they were paying great. And I just was, and my dad never really got over that. Yeah. It put a strain on our relationship. He's from Boston. I don't know where your family is from, like Wisconsin or. No,
my family was from California. My grandparents came from the islands in Portugal.
Oh,
but my parents were actually born here, but. Yeah. So
California farm. Okay.
Yeah. And I can tell you this, I can relate to your relationship and hurt feelings with your dad, because my dad and I crossed, when I left the dairy business, that was a no. In my culture, holy shit. Yeah.
You had to follow family business.
Yeah, it was supposed to be left to me. I mean, even when I went to college, I was like, my uncles were telling my dad, don't let that kid go away to college because you're going to lose him.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. So I was like a black sheep, so I feel you. Yeah, I feel you a little bit because of that stuff that you're telling me. And there was just something, I wasn't sure, but there was something inside of me that just told me I should go in that direction, as much as it hurt, because, you like to have a good relationship with your dad and your mom, right? So it's difficult to do something like that. You really had to believe in yourself.
Yes, exactly. And look at what you became, and you just had to break away from what was familiar, and it is scary. Yeah. And my dad though had this kind of mobster mentality, being from Boston, is where I was going with that. Yeah. And I even with me, there was this like sense of disloyalty. We didn't work together again. Now we're working together, ironically, but he's no longer on the planet. But I am working on movies and channeling what he would want. And I'm also writing a script about his experience when he made the movie that we're remaking. And because it's about our relationship, because he was such a transactional man. And but with me, he was more human. But once I left him, it never really was quite the same. But at the end, it was.
Yeah.
And yeah, at the end, he always cared, and he always was, supportive and there for me. But I don't think he was truly happy for my own. He was happy that I was safe, but not really happy that I was happy without him. Let's say, or working with him.
Yeah. So do you think that was kind of similar to like my situation was like, okay, I'm giving this to you to take it from here, the next generation. It kind of almost sounds that way, Now, but I got to tell you something about my dad to give him credit. He always wanted me. See, my dad never got the chance to go play sports because his dad made him work on that dairy and wouldn't let him participate in sports. So credit to my dad because he actually supported me, and he said, "Look, the most important thing for me is that if you're happy, I'm happy." So, he's not the one that made me feel guilty. I mean, but that wasn't the issue. It was just everybody else in the family. There was a lot of pressure and things like that. But, something at the end of all this, it works out. And, it's just the way it was during those days. I wanted to ask you now, one of the things that I was asked quite a bit in the beginning was, especially back when I first started doing personal training in the early 80s or 82, I think it was, no one was doing that in my area. I mean, LA and San Francisco, some of the bigger cities, you could find a personal trainer. But I was hearing a lot of, why don't you get a normal job, instead of this, whatever you think that you want to do. As a writer in the industry that you're in, it almost seems like, from my perspective, that you don't really have a normal job either, do you?
No, and I had done so well in post-production so fast, so quickly, I assumed it would be the same as a writer because I was in the business now and I had made so many, friends. And so being a writer is, self-motivating, and you're an independent contractor and it's all on your shoulders, and everything is subjective. There is no right way because it's art. And So I mean, it is a little, it's not your normal kind of job, but like you have to do what you love. And I find, I like to produce now even more than I like to write, but I do like to be in control of the material creatively. Yeah. So that's why I like to partner with someone else when I write. Yeah.
So does a producer have more control then, if I'm understanding you, than a writer?
The producer, the producer does have more control in making decisions, final decisions. They hire the writers generally. And then the director ultimately, just how the guilds, the unions are set up, the director has final say. Yeah. But not over the studio, unless the director and the studio have a side agreement. But whoever's financing it generally has the final say. But I like to write because even though the producer has final say, the writer, I can control the narrative, to put it that way, how it's being presented. And the idea is just from a creative standpoint, because there's something inside of me that wants to express a certain perspective, let's say, on an emotional situation. Or just whatever the story is about, or maybe it's a crime, and a crime that can affect so many people. And I do like to write things that have a moral, without it being. I like to write things that are taboo, but also that teach a certain kind of social awareness. Yeah. But nothing like too on the nose, but something like that.
As a writer, you have this concept that you come up with that you're going to write something. Now, it sounds to me like you then at that point, once you come up with this concept, it's almost like you're pitching what you're writing to different producers or directors. Is that right?
So in television, it goes a couple different ways. So nobody had ever done a television show about West Point Academy, as an example, the military academy. And I had been there and was really impressed. first of all, it's an incredible place. It's so beautiful on the Hudson River. And it was discovered by George Washington and in the late 1700s, and then Thomas Jefferson. There's so much history, made it an academy. Where students are paid to attend. They get $100,000 when they graduate. It's like just and they teach leadership. It's not about how to go to war. It's about how to be a leader. So many of our top companies, whether it's Johnson & Johnson or Coca-Cola or Twitter, the CFO of Twitter, they're graduates of West Point. And so as an example, I went there and decided that there should be a TV show about this place for a number of reasons I won't bore you with right now, and military shows are the number one selling shows for the internet, for networks, broadcast networks. So I took this concept as a producer and to sell, and now needed to present it as a writer, and went to align with some political people involved, because West Point would never agree to, they haven't in 60 years allowed anyone to shoot on campus. And I got some I got the Pentagon involved, basically. Yeah. And so we have full access that's never been, it's unprecedented access. And now we're going to producers who have what's called pod deals. So they are already getting paid by, let's say, Netflix or CBS. They have these overall deals, multi-million-dollar deals. And you go to them because they've won Emmys, or they've had extensive track records, and they're already being paid. So the network is thinking, let's go with the person we're already paying than someone new who's coming in, though I've done that many times too. But for a project like this one, which we're about to go out with, we're going to align with a more prominent producer with a big overall deal, so that it can just be hit a home run. Yeah.
Sometimes because I like watching interviews with different people from different walks of industry. I'm always fascinated by their process, to which they get to their result. And sometimes what I've heard from a lot of actors is that they immerse themselves in the character. When you're writing a concept, and let's just say, like in this case, do you immerse yourself into that script by going to, like in this example, going to West Point? Do you get into it to that degree, and does that make a difference in how things turn out sometimes?
And that's a great question. Every project is different, but I do find a part of myself in every project, and I'm motivated to do a project for different reasons. Like this one, I was feeling we were having, it was during the Trump administration, and I was so frustrated by the contentious the battle that was this war that we all were sharing with against one another in America. And I was trying to find a common place for us where we could, we need to all, defend ourselves, defend America, and be leaders, not followers. And so from that standpoint, that was my inspiration for wanting to go to West Point, and I never found a general there who was political. They were all just very patriotic, and that's what I loved, is that no one was a Republican or a Democrat. They might be, but they don't express those opinions at in their jobs. They just they're Americans. And so so from that standpoint, I had this desire. And then our lead characters in that show, because it's about college kids, there's a couple female characters that I identify with, and male characters. So I just take parts of my own life that I've experienced, and I transfer some of that onto those characters. The other shows that I've developed definitely I'm a stronger person. I'm a stronger woman than a conventional, like feminine, just a woman who I'm a very type A kind of alpha woman. And so I can write female cop stories, for example, and women who are fearless. Because I don't have a lot of fear. I'm very sensitive, but I don't have a lot of fear. So I try to put that in my characters too. So I can easily write male characters as well. But everything I write, I do identify with personally for the most part. For some reason, at whatever point in my life, I do.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. When you write something and then you pitch it to someone, have you ever walked away and said, even though that producer or director accepted my script, there's just something that doesn't feel right about this situation, and you pull it? Or do you take the first offer?
Oh, actually, that kind of did happen recently with a company that was interested in the West Point project. I felt that they had the money to make it, but I didn't think they had the experience because they were backed by a very wealthy person and they're a new company. And I did not think they had the experience to the bandwidth to present it properly, and it could get lost. Because when somebody buys it, and if a network doesn't take it, if a studio buys it or somebody finances it and the network decides not to take it, or they don't do a good job developing it, the studio, you're screwed. You've lost your project. And this is such a big one for me that I decided I didn't want to work with them. And it became a mutual thing, but it wasn't until after they had expressed, they wanted so this is where the producer hat came in. They wanted a proposal, how we would collaborate, who would get final say and what, because we're bringing in West Point, and then let's say they're not happy with the script. Is West Point not going to continue working with them when we're the conduit to West Point? So I just decided, I'll put a proposal together and then use that proposal to get another company later that I do want to work with. And then, a bird in the hand. And so, people always want to have something someone else has. So the fact that this other company, which was so solvent, was interested in the project, only helped me, and then we just kind of parted ways. So that's the only time. Other than that, I'm super excited when we do projects. I've generally loved everybody that we've collaborated with, every studio I've worked with, whether it's Universal or USA, NBC, A&E. I've always welcomed other people's ideas. I think that I love to collaborate. I've never been one of those people who hate development.
Well, because the reason why I'm asking that is because, I would imagine, again, I'm just, I don't know. That's the reason why I'm assuming that if you're that type of person that says to a producer or to a company like that, and you say, no, I wonder if that starts creating a bad rap for you. Like, oh, you don't want to deal, because I would think like in the bodybuilding industry, it's a small world actually. And people, it gets around, oh yeah, you work with her and she's a nightmare.
Oh, no, I think it's all perception and how you present it. I created a situation in that scenario where, I don't control the military. So, I can only do so much. And if they're not happy with how things go, it's not my fault for the buyer. So I can only present it in a certain way. So if I were to take a negative tone, but I'm always very congenial and I try never to, it's never a personal thing. I don't think I've ever had an experience with anyone where they've said that there was a problem in any way.
Well, I get the sense from you that you are open-minded. Because, someone like myself, for example, I think sometimes I'm pretty stubborn and pretty close-minded. And I could see that maybe I could get that rap, but I get that sense that there's a way, and I've learned that there's some people that I've learned from, they have a way of being able to be to where they stand for what they believe in, but it's not that they do it in a way that shuts everybody down. They do it in a way that keeps the narrative and the conversation going. And I get that sense about you. That's the reason why I was asking that.
Well, thank you. But I have to say, I wish I were better at that. What I do, and I'm a very honest person. My partner will tell you that I'm a truth savant. And so I always have to say the truth. And so, but in the situation when we're being employed by someone, I have said, okay, if they want us to do something I don't think will work, and I will generally offer my opinion, but I will always do what they want. Ultimately, if they're paying me, they're my boss. Mm-hmm. And so I have had a situation where, like at USA, the network, they wanted us to write it a certain way. And we said, if you do it like this, I forget exactly what it was, but then this won't work out. And they're like, just do it. And we're like, okay, we did it. And they said, you know what? You're right. You were right. It didn't work out. It's not as good as if we had done it the way you had suggested. We're going to pay you extra. They gave us a really nice extra amount of money because they were wrong.
Yeah.
And that I've told people that story, and I guess that's kind of unusual, but I think it was because that they would pay after, having us do it their way. But I don't know. It worked out. So,
well, they happen to be fair-minded about that as well, so that kind of works. How long does it generally, I mean, maybe there's just an average that you can give me, but when you start your script that you come up with as a writer, how long does it take how long does it take to get from the writer to an end project? Because I'm trying to get a sense of, this is, sometimes people don't understand, like in my sport bodybuilding, they just think, they look at the finished product and they're going, oh my God, and then when you tell them it takes, for a competitive bodybuilder, it's usually about 12 years before you can actually stand on a competitive stage. And they can't understand that, just like some people might say, oh, how hard can that be? That's because I heard that too. How hard can this be for you to create that kind of physique to get up on? Why does it take so damn long? So my question again, how long does it take for this process for you for it to happen for you?
Well, the buying process, so there's the part where you come up with a concept and then you present it. From the time that someone agrees, so a network, I'll use USA again as an example. So they would, let's say, buy, there's a buying season and they're looking for, I'm trying to remember, I think it was 8 shows. And they were going to pick up, I think, 2 out of the 8 shows that they developed. So you're competing with, 7 other projects, or I guess 6 if they're taking 2, and you want to make yours the best. Yeah. And so you give them an outline of the show, which takes a few weeks. They give you a few weeks, and they pay you proportionately. Like 10% deposit, 20% upon turning in the outline,
right?
30% more after turning in, or 40% more after turning in the script, and then you do a rewrite. So then, when they're done with that, which is I think about 2 months, sorry. Then the head of the company, the very head of Universal, because they own USA, the one who oversees everything, she in her case, I think it's still Bonnie Hammer. She read our last one, and the president said it was his favorite of all the scripts, and he was really sure that this was going to move forward. Well, she had come from a marketing background and not necessarily a creative development background, but marketing. She'd ascended in the company in marketing. And she said, I can't see it on a bus poster. And so I can't take this script. And even if it was going to be the best show, she just couldn't see it on a bus poster. Yeah. So, so that, I don't know, I can't tell you how long it takes to actually become successful and have a hit TV show on the air. But I mean, the process from the time you sell a concept till it gets either, and then when let's say she had taken it, they would have shot the pilot, they would have cast a pilot, shot the pilot, then they would test it. And if it did well, they would order not, 8 episodes after that, or however many that they thought. Sometimes they'll do a straight to series order based on a script, but it's very rare, very rare. And but it depends on how the pilot turns out. So my show could have gone, and gotten shot, 1 episode of it, and if it didn't test well, they would never have ordered more episodes, and that happens a lot. A lot. This I would say, I could be wrong about this because it was a while ago since I heard this figure, but and I try not to get caught up with the figures and just try to do a good job with what I'm doing and not the statistics. But I think it's like 100 shows like per season that are that they buy, not shows, but concepts that they buy and develop, and then it gets reduced down to a certain number that end up on there.
So as somebody who is, I want to get into the producing side of it as well, but I'm just really curious about this. Someone who's getting in on the writing, coming in on that area, I would think that based on what you just said, that you would have to have a lot of different scripts that were out there floating around. I mean, you're only going to get paid so much for a script that it could be just for a couple of episodes. If I'm hearing this right, I'm thinking, okay, how do you make it in this industry if you're having to wait that long for something to possibly really work out for you, unless you're doing
your own show? So what I didn't tell you is the reason I was trying to sell my own shows was because as a woman, when I first was trying to get jobs, nobody would hire me. It's only now that they're starting to hire women to give them jobs as writers on TV shows. And it was very difficult for me to get a job. And what a writer starting out would do and does is they write a couple scripts as samples of their work. And then people who have TV shows, like as an executive producer of my shows, let's say I would read their material and say, I want them to be a writer on my show, because you're looking to get, let's say, 8 writers, and they sit in a room and they brainstorm ideas for each episode and write it on the board. And every show that I sell, I'm an executive producer on, by the way. So that was my solution to not being hired. I was going to hire myself.
There you go.
So I was like, I got to come up with an idea for a show that's going to sell so I can hire myself, because nobody's giving me a job. And I was, younger at the time, and it was mostly men, usually all men, and their wives didn't want their husbands or boyfriends, whatever, working with a woman, all day long in a room.
Yeah.
That was something that, and the men didn't want to have to deal with that. They didn't want to have to go home and deal with their wives.
Right.
Why is she? And so it's tough. And so, but that's what a writer does. Generally, they write scripts to get jobs. I just decided to take a different route.
Yeah.
So you can get paid per script. And then there's like some producing fees, I think on the USA one, it was like 200,000.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're not starving, but it's worth it, because the risk the benefit outweighs the risk so much. You can make millions and millions of dollars when you have a successful show.
Risk and reward. That's always in play. One of the things I like hearing from you, because a part of my business that I do now is I'm a life coach advocate for people. And I deal with people who are trying to overcome anything from anxiety to insecurity. It could be anything that you perceive as an obstacle. And, one of the things that you're talking about is that you go into, okay, I have this, there's an obstacle is that it's all mainly men running the show, and that's keeping me from being hired. And what you are going and did and went into was you took that obstacle and you turned it into a solution, then I'll just be the executive. I mean, that, and I think that's just a really important lesson to learn, because that way, at least, you're going to take some control over the situation. It certainly doesn't assure you that you're going to be successful, but it just gives you a better chance. We talk in athletics, it's like you want to put the athlete that you're training. If you're training an athlete for a specific sport in a position, all you can do is, as a trainer, is put that athlete in the best position to excel. And that kind of sounds like what you're doing when you make those kinds of decisions.
Yeah. And I feel like if I didn't have a positive response to my ideas, because that's really what's selling, and I could be, an extraterrestrial that walked in there because all they care about is money, making money. Yeah. They may preach other things like, oh, we want, equality or inclusion or whatever. Really, it's about money. Yeah. So it doesn't matter what my sexual orientation, my gender, nothing. And it doesn't matter if they like your ideas.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying my ideas are better than, so many successful writers who have amazing ideas, but they were good enough to want to buy.
Yeah.
And so and each time that happened, it reinforced in me, okay, I can do something here. I can create a niche for myself with my ideas and my sales ability. So, which I learned from my dad.
Yeah.
And, that's part of it. That's part of it.
It's just like in my business, especially when I first was becoming a personal trainer, I had to learn how to wear a lot of hats. It sounds like you do the same thing. I had to be the trainer. I had to be a psychologist to get that person to perform on a long-term basis. Right. You know what I mean? To get the most out of that person, because in my industry, it still blows me away that I'm always frustrated by why people quit on themselves. In some cases, they just self-sabotage. It just blows my mind. Well, that's part of the hat that I got to wear to make. But the point is this: you have to wear a lot of hats in an industry to make this thing work. It's a shitload of work that you're doing that most people have no concept of of what you put into it. But you know what? It's always like that. It's always like that.
Political. I mean, it's very political in that, like you had originally touched on, to not always, to not overreact, to not be a control freak, to not say it has, and you always have to say, yes. I mean, I fortunately had this attitude of the customer is always right. And it's so important. And when I work with other writers, because now I'm executive producing a project I'm not writing, I'm overseeing the project to get it to a pitching point where it can be pitched, and it already is a script, and I'm working with this established writer who's amazing. He's so much better than I would have been in taking notes and doing what other people want him to do, and just all the time reinventing the project and not saying, and just like, no problem, going back to the drawing board 1,000 times speculatively. He's not being paid, because that's how our business is. You do things on spec until you get paid. And in that regard, I can definitely see what you're saying. But for you with training, I just know for myself as having a trainer sometimes, that psychologically, you have to be that psychologist for you, because I will tell my trainer my problems, whatever they are, my concerns, if I'm upset that day, I'm having a hard time, it's like, and you become the psychologist to your clients.
Yeah. Sure. And then of course
confidant. You can't reveal anything they're telling you.
That's right.
Professor.
Yeah.
Like Dennis.
And then of course you have to learn how to market yourself. I mean, and look, I still believe this in very much, and even more so now. My dad used to say it, he said it, and it says, son, it's hard to replace firsthand experience. I talk about this all the time on a lot of podcasts. Albert Einstein said it. He said, true knowledge is through experience. And the bottom line is that there's no better way than learning your craft than to learn it from first-hand experience, because if you don't, there's a lot of stuff that you really don't understand. But when you learn through first-hand experience, it's going to take longer. But I think the end game, when you really, like with me, I'm really big on knowing things to the nth degree, being able to produce a result pretty much at will. Well, hell, that shit doesn't just happen. There's a lot of failing, and there's a lot of, this is the kind of stuff that a lot of people just don't realize, what the kind of stuff that you have to go through. I'm not feeling sorry for you. I'm just pointing out something that
trial and error, and life experience
a lot of failure, and you have to learn how to take failure and spin it on its head and make it something that actually works for you to get success.
And look at, the entertainment business. There's so much rejection. I never would want to be an actor. Imagine the amount of rejection you get as an actor.
Awful.
And and so that's when you have to learn to take that rejection. And like you said, I could definitely see your life experience, how it helps you achieve and be everything that you are right now, and it may look like in a split second you're thinking of something, but it's so many years that went into that split second decision. Experience.
And then I think so many things, like in my industry, as it relates to, I just created a project for weight loss. And the thing about it is the things that we have to do as a bodybuilder is so counterintuitive to what you think that you should do. It's hard to trust that process unless you, in fact, are going through that yourself. Like when I'm telling somebody that I want you to increase your caloric intake to lose weight, what the fuck are you talking about? What do you mean?
I'm trust you. Yeah.
So if you don't,
to check your metabolism, is that why?
It's a way to.
I'm going to lose so much weight on this trip. Because I've been eating so many cookies. So
it's just there's things that you can do. The point is this: it's just having that knowledge to the nth degree to understand that, and then to trust it. That you have to. I keep telling the people that really want to take to the next step, because I turn away most people. Because you have to have proper mindset in order to be able to do anything that's difficult. Okay, whether it's losing weight or doing the stuff that you're doing, you have to have the right mindset. And I tell them, if you cannot trust the process, you can't do this program. I assure you that you're only going to be disappointed unless you have that. You're willing to go through that process. And lo and behold, when all of a sudden it works as a bodybuilder, it's like I saw it work for me. That gives you confidence. To understand how to translate that to somebody else. Again, I'm just getting back to firsthand experience.
Key. Confidence is the key. You're right.
Yeah, and I heard somebody say one time on television, it was on tennis. I like watching pro tennis, and they said so many times confidence is actually more important than experience, even though that experience is really important to have. But if you're not confident, well, there you go. Yeah, you gotta have all these things that are working for you, but you got to put up with a lot of defeat and failure. Period.
Yes, I think that's the main thing that I've noticed in successful people in my business, anyway, is that level of confidence, even though they may not be cocky. Like writers are often shy, or self-deprecating, I should say, but still their belief in themselves propels, it enables them to continue propelling forward and having conviction in their work. And you're right, that is the most important, and I think most common thread in successful people is that confidence and bravery. I think bravery, to take that, to lean in and just go for it.
Yeah. And you have to have a short memory. If something, if you go down, if you get knocked down, you got to, and yet how many of us, I've done it when I was younger, I obsessed with something that I shouldn't have been obsessing about. I should take that negative thing that happened to me, deal with it very quickly, and then have a short memory and move forward. And I think that's all life is, because in my mind, life is a struggle. It's always going to be a struggle. And the minute it's not, then you're either growing or you're dying, in my opinion, so as long as you're out there hanging it out there, you got to put up with all this stuff.
And I think that's true about having a short memory. And my hurdle has been, what if this happens, or what if that happens, and what if they don't like this, but then what if, and you have to overcome that too. That's another stumbling block, and just listen to your instincts and just, put your blinders on and not constantly think of the what ifs. Because anything with the world, like with COVID or with anything that was happening, and you're like, well, what if we were starting to just see such unbelievable things happen that other things could enter our minds. And well, then what if this happens? And and everything collapses, or, and so you just have to have faith. I think faith is important.
Well, and the thing about it is too, listen, in order for you, I got into Stoicism, and it's been a huge, positive thing that I've gotten into. But one of the things that they talk about, and I've done this just naturally over the years in sport, is they say you have to, before you're going like into a game, for example, you have to play out every scenario potentially that could happen in that game. That includes negative things happening as well as positive things happening. Because if you can deal with that, not obsess with that, but if you can address that and understand that, then you're ahead of the game. And because bad stuff is going to happen.
Yeah, to plan for hope for the best, but plan for the worst.
Exactly.
Yeah, but also in a sales presentation, like for a television show, a pitch, I always anticipate negative reactions. Like, what if, not negative reactions, but not just more questions. Yeah. I try to anticipate every question that someone could have. Or if you're waiting for a call back and they're going to say, there's one thing we're concerned about.
Yeah.
So I try to anticipate those things. So I can just be like, I'm glad you mentioned that, because here's how we're going to handle that.
It puts you in a very strong position.
Like you're saying. Yeah, exactly. And your book, I'm looking forward to reading that as well.
Oh yeah, I'm going to get that to you. Now, as it relates to producing, now you said you really want to get on that side of it. Do you have anything that you maybe you said that in the beginning of the show that you are producing, and how is that going for you? And what kind of is there a certain genre that you want to focus on, or just something that just I don't know, that it just says something to you on the inside?
So every project that I write, I produce as a television writer. I'm an executive producer on everything that I'm working, that I've told you about.
Yeah.
And as far as feature films go, like when you and I briefly spoke about your book, I could see that as a Netflix movie. But my background and like this project that I was telling about, that is the remakes, with my dad's film that was remade into Knock Knock with Ana de Armas and Keanu Reeves and Lorenzo D'Izzo, that Eli Roth did. And now I'm going to be an executive producer on 10 remakes in foreign countries with that.
Yeah.
So, and I've been told I'll be working my butt off. So I think they'll have me producing too, but we're not sure what that deal is going to look like. So executive producing is kind of like you're over all of it, overseeing everything, and, getting directors together and writers and all the below the line, they call it, people, which are the, whether it's wardrobe, but each country is going to be different. So they may have someone in each country handling all of that. But you look at the money, you oversee all that, make sure that's being spent the way it should be.
Yeah.
And producing is more the day-to-day, as far as movies go, that you would be involved. I don't really, and that's what I have done too. By the way, I was involved. We did SWAT for Netflix. I did a movie called SWAT, Firefight, and with Neil Moritz, who did the original SWAT. This isn't the TV show that Sean Ryan does, though that's a great, great show. And Sean Ryan's a very good friend of ours. I did that, and I executive produced original movie for Showtime. So it's not like I want to get into producing. I'm already producing, and I'm kind of just a natural producer.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, it like anything else, it sounds like you have to, this has to be something you have passion for. Just like, and that was one of the things that turned my life around, because I wanted to be a professional football player. I ended up getting hurt in college, and I used my injury as a way to say, well, maybe this was a sign for me. What I didn't know is the effects of giving up on yourself when you have to look yourself in the mirror and you're wondering, why the hell am I so unhappy? And it was obvious that what I did is I shortchanged myself. That didn't mean that if I just would have kept on going that I would have made it, but it's just that I'd stopped before that, and I used an injury as an excuse. And I made a promise to myself after that happened. This was in college. I'm back on the dairy. The dairy wasn't in my blood. It wasn't passionate. I wasn't passionate about it on any level. I was so miserable in those days. And that the only way that I could deal with this was to tell myself, if I ever get a chance to do something that I have passion for, that I have that buzz for, I will not question that.
And not to undervalue yourself.
Yeah. And what I did is when I went out and left the dairy, trying to be a personal trainer in 82 when no one knew what that was.
Right.
It didn't matter to me. I was scared shitless, I'll be honest with you, but the I did not ever want to be that unhappy again. And that was the best thing.
Did you find that a lot of people were open to it?
What's that?
When you, did you find, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but did you find that there were people who, because it was so rare, that personal training was so rare, did you find that you were in high demand in a short amount of time?
No, okay. Because in my town, they didn't even know what the hell a personal trainer was. They thought I was an aerobics instructor. So,
right.
So there's my obstacle, you know, so I had to go in solution mode. So what I did, I started educating people as to the reason why they needed me. I went to service centers and, like the Kiwanis and Rotaries of the world. And keep in mind, which is hard to believe now, in 82, women didn't want to go to gyms and weight train because they thought they were going to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger, which is a misconception.
But Sports Connection, do you remember Sports Connection?
Yes, I do.
In Santa Monica, that's where my first job was.
Okay.
Schwarzenegger and all those guys, and it was actually in that year.
Yeah, yeah. So it was. I had a uphill battle, especially in the beginning. But I got to tell you something, Dyan. I was never happier. And, looking back now, after been in the business now for 40 years, it's the best thing that I ever did. And I've never been more scared out of my damn mind. But, that goes to show you that passion that you have will overcome a lot of obstacles if you really are sincere to that passion, in my mind.
I agree. And again, faith, just, and if it's not working, then to be adaptable. As well.
And that's hard too. People hate change, and we hate change. And that's you're constantly overcoming things like that. And that's, like I said, people don't have, sometimes people don't really understand. For those of people that end up making it to some degree, they have no idea how many obstacles they keep jumping over on a regular basis to get to that point. It's a part of that process, in other words.
And also when you're presented with choices, not that it's like, oh, do I want to make $1 million or $2 million? It's not that kind of choice. It's more like, you can't predict which path is going to be the best, and you're presented with two options, let's say. And I don't know if this goes for everyone. I feel kind of lucky in that I pay attention to signs that occur in my life, and I kind of lean toward the one that feels right, because there's been more like coincidences surrounding it, or it seems like certain aspects of it philosophically resonate with me. You know what I mean? And that's making choices, those choices when you don't have a lot more to go on than that. Yeah.
And what you have to really believe, because most in so many instances, your intuition and your instinctiveness is the correct path, but it's not the one that's the safest, or it feels like it's the safest.
That's right. That's right. Doesn't feel like the safest. It can be scary.
It can be scary. Anyway. Hey, well, listen, it was delightful meeting you. Thank you for coming on. I mean, I've never really gotten into any kind of a conversation with somebody who's started where you have, and that process. So I learned a little bit today, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I hope that, hey, listen, all I want you to do is make me a promise, and I'm going to make you feel guilty if you don't do it. So don't worry about that. It's a Portuguese in me. We got to make you feel guilty. Whenever you produce a movie that hits it somewhere, Netflix or wherever, why don't you come back and talk about it on another podcast?
Are you kidding? I'll have you to any screening we have or opening. Yeah. Like that. I would love that. I have to stay in touch.
That would be the second time I do this because I trained Kevin Costner 1,000 years ago. And I got on that little tour bus with screenings and all that kind of stuff. That was an eye-opener and some of the funnest times that I had as a personal trainer. So
that's so great.
So I'll be looking forward to doing the same thing with you and going to those little premieres, secret premieres.
I hope you touch my career the way you touched his. So good.
Anyway.
Hopefully I'll take it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Are you in Italy?
I am. I'm in Milan right now, and I know your play. What city is your new play?
It's called Corsagna. It's a small village, and it's near maybe a part of it. It's in the Tuscan Valley, and it's Lucca. Have you heard of Lucca?
No, I mean I know Florence.
It's an hour from Florence. It's in central part of Italy. So I'm in between kind of Pisa, the Leaning Tower of Pisa.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm in between that. That's like 88,000 people. And then over here you have Florence. And Lucca, is about 90,000 people. The town that I live in, there's 600 people. So,
wow, that's my dream.
You know what I mean?
That's my dream. Like after all this hard work that we've done,
I'm
ready for that. Exactly.
Nice. Yeah. So one of these days, maybe we'll, run into each other because I plan on going to Florence. I'm really big into fashion.
I'm going to take a train to see you in Lucca.
Cool. Nice. I'll let you know when we're there. Anyway,
good.
Thanks again for coming on, and we'll talk again soon.
Talking with you.
All right. Ciao.
Okay. Bye. Ciao.
Ciao. Ciao.